You don't lack motivation. You lack control. And that truth should sting. Every man who says he's building mental toughness while skipping the basics is lying to himself. Toughness isn't born in chaos or hype. It's carved by daily discipline. So boring, so repetitive, so unforgiving that weak men quit before the results even start. If that offends you, good. Offense is the first crack in delusion. Here's the reality you've been avoiding. Your mind doesn't respond to words. It responds to commands enforced by action. You talk confidence, but your routines speak fear. You talk strength, but your habits scream softness. Mental toughness isn't a personality trait, it's a byproduct. Miss the process and you'll never touch the outcome. Period. You've been taught that toughness comes from intensity, from rage, from suffering loudly. That's nonsense. That's emotional cosplay. Real toughness comes from precision, from doing the same hard thing every day, without drama, without applause, without needing to feel powerful. Discipline isn't exciting. That's why it works. It filters out pretenders. Let me break something most men don't understand. When you operate under strict daily discipline, you start speaking in tongues, not spiritually, functionally. Your behavior becomes a language outsiders can't decode. You wake up before excuses. You move without negotiation. You execute without emotion. To weak men, it looks insane. To powerful men, it's fluency. You're no longer speaking motivation. You're speaking command. This is where identity shifts. Discipline rewires how you think, move, and decide. Your nervous system adapts. Your reactions sharpen. Your tolerance for nonsense collapses. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking approval. You stop waiting. That's dominance, not aggression authority. The kind that doesn't announce itself. Most people never reach this state because discipline exposes them. It strips away their stories. It reveals that they were never tired, just undisciplined. Never unlucky, just inconsistent. Daily discipline is ruthless because it keeps receipts. Every skipped workout, every delayed task, every broken promise is recorded. And over time, those records decide whether you're a man in control or a man making excuses. Most men think discipline is something you promise yourself. A plan, a declaration, a dramatic moment where you decide today is different. That's fantasy. Discipline doesn't care what you say you're going to do. It only records what you repeat. Every day you wake up, your behavior submits evidence, not intentions, not ambition. Evidence, and the verdict is always accurate. If your confidence comes from what you plan to do, it's fragile. If it comes from what you've already done hundreds of times, it's unshakable. That's the difference between men who talk with volume and men who move with certainty. One is loud because he's trying to convince himself. The other is quiet because proof doesn't need explaining. Most people want discipline to feel empowering. That's the first mistake. Real discipline feels mechanical, cold, almost disrespectful to your emotions. You do the work whether you feel capable or not. You train whether the energy is there or not. You execute because it's scheduled, not because you're inspired. This is where mental toughness actually forms, when action is no longer dependent on mood. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If your discipline disappears when conditions aren't perfect, it was never discipline. It was convenience, pretending to be commitment. Real discipline survives boredom. It survives frustration. It survives days where nothing feels rewarding. And that's why it works. Weak systems collapse under pressure. Strong systems don't care about pressure. They were designed for it. Every skipped task teaches your mind something. Every delay sends a signal. Every excuse becomes a vote. Over time, those votes shape your identity. Not the identity you claim online or talk about with friends, but the one your nervous system believes. Your mind learns whether you're a man who follows through or a man who negotiates. And once that belief is formed, everything else follows. This is why discipline is proof, because proof removes doubt. When you've shown up daily without applause, without motivation, without external pressure, your mind stops questioning your authority. You don't need self-talk. You don't need hype. You've already demonstrated control. That internal respect is what most people mistake for confidence. Men who lack discipline try to replace proof with intensity. They go all in for a week, burn out, disappear, then restart with another speech. That cycle destroys self-trust. Every restart quietly tells your brain, I don't finish. Over time, your own words lose credibility. You start doubting yourself before the world even gets involved. Discipline fixes this by being boring and relentless. Same wake-up time, same standards, same non-negotiables. No emotional drama, no exceptions because you're tired. That repetition trains certainty. You stop asking if you can do hard things because you already have thousands of times in small, unglamorous ways. This is also why disciplined men don't chase motivation. Motivation is a reaction. Discipline is a command. One waits, the other moves. When your life is built on commands you follow regardless of feeling, you develop something rare, internal authority. You don't need validation because you already know who's in charge. So understand this clearly. Discipline is not a future version of you. It's not a promise you're working toward. It's a daily verdict delivered by your actions. Every day you either reinforce control or surrender it. And the mind never forgets which one you chose. Most men believe their mind is something they have to motivate, negotiate with, or gently encourage. That belief alone guarantees weakness. The mind is not a partner. It is a system. And every system follows the rules you enforce. If your mind ignores you, it's because you trained it to. Not intentionally, but consistently. From the moment you delay a task, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. Commands are optional. You tell yourself you'll do it later, and later arrives without consequence. That moment seems harmless, but it's not. It's conditioning. You are teaching your brain that resistance works. Do that often enough, and your mind stops responding to pressure altogether. It becomes lazy, defensive, and unreliable. Most people think mental strength comes from thinking the right thoughts. That's backward. Thoughts are downstream. Behavior is upstream. The brain is designed to adapt to action, not intention. When you act immediately, even without confidence, your nervous system recalibrates. It recognizes authority. When you hesitate, rationalize, or wait to feel ready, it recognizes weakness. This is why enforcement matters. A command without follow-through is not a command. It's a suggestion, and suggestions create chaos. When you say you'll wake up early but don't, your mind logs that failure. When you promise to train but skip, it records another breach. Over time, your internal voice loses rank. You start arguing with yourself instead of directing yourself. Here's what most men don't want to admit. Their mind doesn't trust them. It has seen too many broken promises, too many negotiations, too many exceptions. So when it's time to do something difficult, the mind resists. Not because it's weak, but because it has learned that resistance wins. You taught it that pattern. Action changes this fast, but only if it's enforced without emotion. You don't wait to feel confident to move. You move to train confidence. You don't ask how you feel before executing. You execute to dictate how you feel. This reversal is where control begins. The mind stops leading. It starts following. The moment you act despite discomfort, something shifts. The brain receives a clear message. Hesitation is irrelevant. Over time, this becomes automatic. Tasks that once felt heavy lose their weight. Decisions speed up. Internal noise quiets. Not because life got easier, but because authority was established. Men who lack this enforcement rely on external pressure, deadlines, fear, other people watching. That's not strength, that's dependency. The goal is internal command, the ability to decide and move without witnesses, rewards, or consequences. That's real control. Every enforced action strengthens that control. Every time you do the hard thing immediately, your mind learns precision. Every time you eliminate negotiation, your mental friction decreases. Eventually, discipline feels natural, not because it's easy, but because resistance has been trained out. This is also why emotional discipline matters. When feelings dictate action, the mind stays unstable. When action dictates feeling, the system stabilizes. You stop riding emotional highs and lows. You become predictable to yourself. And predictability is power. Understand this clearly. Your mind will always follow the strongest pattern. If excuses are repeated, excuses become law. If action is enforced, action becomes automatic. There is no neutrality. You are always training something. The men who master this don't speak about mindset. They don't analyze endlessly. They enforce quietly, relentlessly. And over time, their mind stops questioning their authority because it has no evidence to justify rebellion. Most men confuse movement with progress. They believe power comes from moments of intensity, bursts of effort, emotional surges, dramatic starts. That belief keeps them average. Intensity is loud, visible, and short-lived. It creates noise, not leverage. The men who actually build power don't rely on spikes. They rely on systems that operate whether they feel strong or not. Intensity is attractive because it feels heroic. You push hard for a few days, feel alive, then collapse. That cycle gives the illusion of effort without producing results. It also trains instability. Your mind begins to associate action with emotional fuel. When the fuel disappears, so does the action. Over time, you become dependent on feeling on to perform. That dependency is weakness disguised as passion. Consistency works differently. It removes emotion from execution. When your actions are governed by systems, not moods, your output becomes predictable. Predictability is not boring, it's dominance. In any environment, the individual who performs reliably controls outcomes. The one who waits for intensity is always reacting, never leading. This is why systems matter more than willpower. Willpower burns. Systems compound. A man who trains daily at a controlled pace will outperform the man who trains violently once a week. Not because he's stronger, but because his system never collapses. Power isn't built by extremes. It's built by accumulation. Most people resist consistency because it exposes them. A system reveals exactly who you are. There's no hiding behind enthusiasm or speeches. When the schedule is fixed, the truth comes out. Either you show up or you don't. And that honesty is uncomfortable for men who live on potential instead of performance. Consistency also reshapes identity. When you act daily, even at low intensity, your self-image shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You become someone who operates. That shift is subtle but permanent. You don't need to prove anything. Your behavior already has. Intensity creates emotional highs, but it also creates crashes. Those crashes damage self-trust. Each time you burn out, your mind learns that effort is dangerous. It starts protecting you by resisting future action. That's why people feel tired before they even start. Their system has been trained to avoid spikes. Consistency removes that fear. Because the load is controlled, the mind stays calm. There's no threat of collapse. Over time, effort feels normal. Not exciting. Normal. And normal execution is where power actually grows. High-level men design their lives to minimize decision-making. Same routines, same standards, same expectations. This isn't rigidity, it's efficiency. Every decision you remove is energy you preserve. Every habit you automate is friction you eliminate. That's how consistency compounds quietly while others chase motivation. The irony is that consistency eventually creates intensity. But by the time it arrives, it's stable. It doesn't spike and vanish. It becomes pressure you can sustain. That's real power, the ability to apply force without burning out. Men who understand this stop talking about going all in. They don't need dramatic resets. They don't start over every Monday. Their system doesn't collapse on bad days because bad days were accounted for. That's the difference between men who look strong and men who actually are. When action is consistent, results become inevitable. Not because of talent, not because of luck. Because systems don't care how you feel. They only care that you show up. Most men believe identity is something they think about or talk into existence. They repeat phrases about who they want to become, hoping repetition alone will make it real. It never does. Identity doesn't respond to language, it responds to evidence. And discipline is the mechanism that produces that evidence day after day without needing belief first. Every disciplined action casts a vote for the kind of man you are becoming. Not the version you imagine, but the one your mind actually accepts. When you train consistently, complete tasks on schedule, and hold standards when no one is watching, your nervous system updates its self-image. You stop asking whether you are capable. Capability becomes assumed. This is where most men get it wrong. They try to change identity before changing behavior. That sequence never works. The mind doesn't upgrade its self-concept based on desire. It upgrades it based on proof. Discipline provides that proof in small, repeatable doses. No drama, no declarations, just quiet accumulation. As this evidence stacks, something subtle happens. You no longer need to force confidence. It shows up as posture, tone, and decisiveness. You speak less because you don't need to convince anyone. You move differently because hesitation no longer feels natural. Discipline reshapes how you occupy space, not just how you schedule time. Men without this foundation perform strength. Men with it embody it. The difference is immediately visible. One reacts emotionally. The other responds strategically. One seeks validation. The other operates from internal alignment. That alignment is the real transformation discipline creates. Identity shift also collapses excuses. When disciplined action becomes normal, inconsistency feels foreign. Skipping work creates discomfort, not relief. This is a powerful reversal. Most men feel pain when they act and comfort when they avoid. Discipline flips that pattern. Avoidance starts to feel expensive. Action feels clean. This shift is what separates men who work on themselves from men who have already changed. There's no internal debate, no motivational rituals. Execution becomes default. And default behavior is identity in motion. The process isn't glamorous. In fact, it often feels underwhelming. That's the point. If discipline felt dramatic, it would feed ego instead of rewiring it. The real work happens when you complete tasks without emotional payoff. That's when identity locks in. Over time, this new identity hardens, not in a rigid way, but in a reliable one. You trust yourself, not because you think highly of yourself, but because your track record is undeniable. Self-trust replaces self-talk. Authority replaces effort. This is also why disciplined men don't chase reinvention. They don't need to. Their identity is reinforced daily. It doesn't drift because it's anchored to behavior. While others reinvent themselves every few months, disciplined men compound quietly. Eventually, the external world responds. Opportunities increase. Resistance decreases. Not because of luck, but because people sense certainty. And certainty comes from alignment between who you say you are and what you repeatedly do. Discipline doesn't just change outcomes, it changes who you are allowed to be. And once that shift happens, going back feels impossible, not because you're forcing yourself forward, but because the old version no longer fits. Most men are ruled by sensations they barely understand. They wake up and immediately check how they feel, then let that feeling decide how the day will go. That single habit quietly destroys mental toughness. When feelings become the authority, discipline collapses. Power requires a different order of operations. Emotions are reactive by nature. They respond to sleep, stress, diet, opinions, memories, and random stimuli. Building your life around something that unstable guarantees inconsistency. Yet most men do exactly that. They wait to feel ready, motivated, confident, or strong before acting. What they don't realize is that waiting is a decision, and it always favors weakness. Decision-driven men operate differently. They decide first, then act, then let emotions adjust. This isn't suppression, it's hierarchy. Feelings are allowed, but they don't vote. When action is dictated by decision, the nervous system stabilizes. You stop swinging between highs and lows because nothing external is steering you. This is where emotional silence begins. Not numbness, silence. The internal noise fades because there's no debate happening. You're not asking yourself if you should train, work, or execute. You already decided. That clarity alone creates a sense of calm most men never experience. Men who rely on feelings live in reaction mode. A bad mood derails the day. A minor setback becomes an excuse. A lack of energy turns into avoidance. Over time, this trains fragility. The mind starts protecting comfort instead of pursuing outcomes. When decisions lead and emotions follow, the opposite happens. You act despite discomfort, and the discomfort loses influence. The mind adapts quickly. It learns that resistance doesn't change the outcome. Eventually, resistance stops showing up at full volume. Tasks that once felt heavy become neutral. This is why disciplined men appear emotionally controlled. It's not because they feel less. It's because feelings are no longer in charge. Their actions are anchored to standards, not states. Standards don't fluctuate. Moods do. Most men underestimate how exhausting emotional decision-making is. Constantly checking how you feel drains energy. It creates hesitation, second-guessing, and internal friction. Decision-based execution removes that friction. You conserve mental bandwidth by eliminating unnecessary questions. This also builds respect internally. When you see yourself act regardless of feeling, trust forms. That trust quiets anxiety. You stop worrying about whether you'll follow through, because you already know the answer. That certainty is rare and powerful. Men who don't develop this skill compensate with stimulation. Music, speeches, rage, external fuel, all of it is temporary. When the stimulus fades, so does action. Decision-led men don't need fuel, they need clarity. Once the decision is made, movement is automatic. Over time, this creates a controlled emotional baseline. You're not numb, you're stable. Highs don't make you reckless. Lows don't make you weak. You stay functional under pressure because your behavior isn't tied to how you feel in the moment. This is the discipline most men avoid because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame mood, stress, or lack of motivation. You either decided or you didn't. That level of accountability is uncomfortable, but it's also where authority is built. Men who master this stop talking about mindset. They don't need to. Their decisions already run the system. Most men believe there's a neutral zone in life, a place where nothing is gained and nothing is lost. That belief is comfortable and completely false. Every day is directional. You are either strengthening control over your routine or surrendering it. There is no pause button. The routine you don't dominate will quietly dominate you instead. Your routine is not just a schedule. It's a system of influence. It dictates when you wake up, how you respond to pressure, what you prioritize, and how you justify avoidance. If you don't consciously design and enforce it, it will be shaped by convenience, distraction, and impulse. Those forces don't build strength. They build dependence. Most men don't realize they're being controlled because the control feels familiar. Sleeping in feels normal. Delaying tasks feels harmless. Breaking promises to yourself feels private. But repetition turns privacy into identity. The routine begins to set expectations for you, and once expectations are set, behavior follows without resistance. When a man dominates his routine, the dynamic reverses. The day doesn't ask him questions. It receives instructions. Wake-up times are fixed. Work blocks are protected. Physical training is non-negotiable, not because of obsession, but because order creates freedom. Chaos demands constant attention. Order runs quietly in the background. The absence of structure doesn't create flexibility. It creates fragility. Men without routines are easily disrupted. One bad night of sleep throws them off. One emotional event derails productivity. One distraction hijacks the day. That instability erodes confidence over time because nothing feels solid. Routine dominance builds a different kind of confidence, not excitement, reliability. You know what happens next because you designed it. That predictability reduces stress and sharpens focus. You stop reacting to the day and start directing it. Many men resist strict routines because they confuse discipline with restriction. In reality, discipline removes friction. When decisions are pre-made, energy is preserved. You don't debate whether to train. You train. You don't negotiate work time. You work. That efficiency compounds. There's also a psychological edge to routine control. When you repeatedly do what you said you would do, your internal authority strengthens. The mind stops challenging your decisions because history supports them. Over time, the routine becomes self-enforcing. Deviations feel uncomfortable. Structure feels natural. Men who avoid this level of control often claim they want freedom. What they really want is escape from responsibility. True freedom comes from mastery, not avoidance. The man who controls his routine can improvise when needed. The man who doesn't is always improvising and always behind. Every undisciplined routine has a cost. Missed opportunities, slower progress, mental clutter, reduced self-respect. These costs accumulate quietly, which is why they're ignored, but they are paid eventually, usually in regret. Dominating your routine isn't about perfection, it's about authority. You decide the rules and you follow them. When you don't, you correct immediately. No drama, no excuses. That consistency builds momentum. That's hard to stop. The men who win long-term aren't the most talented or aggressive. They are the ones whose routines are aligned with their goals and enforced daily. While others search for breakthroughs, they execute processes. And processes always outlast motivation. When routine is mastered, life becomes simpler, not easier, simpler. Newer decisions, less noise, more output. And the direction is always forward because control is never left unattended. So understand this clearly. Mental toughness isn't something you chase. It's something you become when your daily discipline is non-negotiable. If your days are sloppy, your mind will be weak. If your actions are sharp, your thoughts will follow. There's no shortcut, no hack, no mercy. Either you impose order on yourself every day or the world will dominate you instead. Choose, because one way or another, dominance is always decided.